Hey everyone, welcome back to Gary Talks Truth, the discussion for people who actually love this country and the Constitution. I was watching Morning Joe this morning, as is my habit, and I know he's a blowhard. I'm sorry, what? I'm not sure if I can really say that. They're doing the research in the Funkin' Wagonals. But he had John Meacham on this morning, a man that I admire tremendously. I've read most of his work, and it would behoove you, if you have any interest in American history, to do the same. And Mr. Meacham pointed out that we've come to the point where there's two types of people in this country. There's people who stand for the Constitution, and there's people that just want to tear it up. I see it pretty much the same, but I use different labels. The way I see it, there's, in this country of ours that we all love so much, there are two kinds of people. I agree with that. One are Americans, and the other are Maga-Nazis. So who are the Maga-Nazis? Well, that's sort of obvious, I guess. If you supported Dirty Little Donnie, if you think January 6th was nothing, if you think all the charges should be dropped against him, maybe we should apologize and make him king or something, then you're a Maga-Nazi. It's simple as that. You do not believe in the Constitution. You do not believe in the rule of law. And I'm not putting your words in your mouth. Your ilk is saying this pretty much nonstop every friggin' day. So anybody who's offended by the tag Maga-Nazi, that's just too damn bad. I don't really care. And again, I've drawn parallels before. You know, what did the real Nazis, not these make-believe, pretend, wannabe Nazis, do when they took over power? First, they took over the media and filled it full of lies and names for people and cultures, and built up the Aryan race to the exclusion of all others. All art that wasn't created by Aryan Germans was labeled degenerate art, and that's books, music, paintings, actors, anything. Then the next thing they did was take over the educational system, and the younger the better. If you're going to implant your hatred and your putrid ideas into a population, and you're taking the long look, if you're playing the long game, then you start with the kiddies. So, nice little segue here. Let's talk about how much the Maga-Nazis love them kiddies, okay, shall we? In Wisconsin, and by the way, I just want to say, I try to stay away from the main news stories. I think the media does an adequate job of covering Trump's 300 or 600 trials and charges, and I mean, every time I say his name, I feel like I'm going to vomit. So I'd rather not say it again, but you know what I mean. I'll let the media cover the main stuff, and I'll pick up the stuff that sort of slips between the cracks. And this is certainly one of those stories. The Waukesha School District in Wisconsin, which I'm actually kind of familiar with. My wife is from that area. Her father lived in Waukesha before he passed away. And if you drove around there, it's deceptive. It's very green. It's very pretty. Most of it's pretty much upper middle class or middle class. And you might be fooled into thinking that this is a place where nice people live. But let me correct that illusion for you. Oops. In the Waukesha School District, they have absolutely refused to accept any money for free lunches for their students. The reason? Well, according to a Karen, Karin, and I'm not really good with a lot of names, Rajnick, Rajnick, the Nazis, Karen, said that, get this, pay attention, that families would become spoiled if their children were allowed to eat. So Karen and her ilk, again, have decided in their infinite wisdom that they're going to toughen these kids up, man. You're going to toughen them up by not feeding them. That's a good idea. I wonder how she'd like it if her children were denied food through no fault of their own. You got to remember, these children aren't living in poverty because they filled out a form and asked to. You know, they were born into it, unfortunately. So what's a kid to do? You just hope that the adults around you will at least try to understand your situation and maybe do something to help you, instead of spitting in your face, banning your books, and denying you food, as Karen there in the Waukesha School District is very adamant about doing. She's just not a very nice person. You know, the hunger, childhood hunger rose in that area since the pandemic, not down. It went up from 9% of the population to 13%. Now, I'm sure Karen would have been a lot happier if it would have risen from 9 to, say, 80, you know. That's one way to get rid of the spoiled little brats, is starve them to death or encourage them to move away so they're someone else's problem. So, what's being done about it? The Agriculture Secretary, Tom Vilsack, just the other day in Greeley, Colorado, unveiled a plan to help these children. If you can imagine, under the Trump administration, helping children was a much lower priority than Hunter Biden's laptop. So they got no help. And he's seeking to lower the eligibility provisions for working parents, sometimes working 2, 3, 4 jobs together just to keep a roof over their heads, and they really can't afford even subsidized school lunches for their children. And of course, there's always the haves in the Nazi lifeboat that, as people are swimming asking for help, use the oars to smack them in the head and push them away, and saying, you're going to get spoiled if you ride in our boat. So it's interesting to look at which states still do free lunches for all kids, all children, regardless. So I got to read from a list here, so I'll look away for a minute. We're talking about California, of course, Maine, Colorado, Minnesota, New Mexico, Vermont, Michigan, Massachusetts, and Illinois will be joining them soon. The bill has already passed the legislature and is just awaiting the governor's signature. So we can expect them to be joining this, how would you say, this parade of people who care about their children. But that still only makes 10 states out of 50. So if you don't live in one of those states, kiddies, good luck. But let's take a look back over those states and see where the Maga-Nazis reign. California, no Maga-Nazis reign there. Maine, it's touch and go, but no, they're good people up there. I'm intimately familiar with the people of Maine. Colorado, well, that's where retired hooker Bobert is from, but as far as the rest of the state, no. Now, New Mexico is a little bit different. They are in constant trouble with the federal government for disobeying, turning their back, and thumbing their nose at Supreme Court decisions because they are, superior people and they don't need somebody in Washington to tell them what to do. Minnesota, no, Maga-Nazis aren't in charge there. Vermont, no. Michigan, no, not anymore. They were all over the place, running wild. Massachusetts, no bastion of Maga-Nazi dumb. And Illinois, no, they have a very progressive governor. The mayors of the big cities actually care about their constituents instead of lining their own pockets, improving their own resume for higher office so they can screw more people over. But look around your state, folks. Ask yourself, are my kids being getting enough food to eat every day. And if you can afford these school lunches, then pay for them. Help the system out. Don't be a leech. Don't take food out of a hungry child's mouth. But if you can't pay for these meals, don't be ashamed. There's no shame in asking for help, especially when children are involved. So just take a look around your own state. If you're happy with the way things are, if your children are being taken care of, if your books aren't being banned, if your teachers aren't being forced out, if your librarians are secure in their jobs, then I'm very, very happy for you. If they're not, well, there's a number of things you can do. You can move, but that's not always practical due to family, jobs, things like that. The other thing is vote. Just vote. Vote in every election. I don't care if it's dog catcher, school board, county librarian, comptroller. Get out and vote. And remember what I said, there's only two kinds of people in this country anymore. There's Americans and there's Maga-Nazis. So if you see an R after somebody's name, if you see an R, it used to stand for something, but now it stands for Maga-Nazi. I defy anybody to point to more than a half a dozen people who have an R behind their name who are not Maga-Nazis. And if you can identify them, I will be the first to contact them and apologize. But I'm not concerned at all about that because I know there aren't. I pay attention to the world around me. I get my news from reliable sources. So, okay, that's the school lunch thing. But there's even something more insidious happening in our world. And it's called PragerU for Kids. Now, a nonpartisan group called Media Matters for America, boy, I don't know how they did it. They watched every single damn one of their Maga-Nazi propaganda bullshit videos. These people are just the heart of evil. It's founded by two worthless human beings, Texas brothers, who made their fortune fracking. So you can kind of see where their point of view is coming from. So here's how they started out. I'm quoting now from Media Matters for America, and you can read this report anytime. Quote, a cartoon Booker T. Washington distorting the history of the Civil War. A narrator explaining that embracing climate denialism is akin to participating in the Warsaw Uprising. You can imagine that. An instructional video telling girls that conforming to gender stereotypes is a great way to embrace their femininity. A dramatization of the supposedly civilizing, benevolent era of British colonial rule in India. Of course, those all lies and easily proved. But anyway, it goes on to say, these are just some of the episodes of PragerU Kids, an offshoot of right-wing propaganda organization PragerU, that Florida and now Oklahoma have just approved for use in its public school classrooms. And Florida's not paying for lunches, and then they're feeding this crap into young minds. Oklahoma, you're in the same damn boat. If you're doing this to your children, you are guilty of child abuse. So Media Matters reviewed every single one of their videos. Can you imagine the torture that must have been and the agonizing thing? I can't imagine. It's like reporters having to watch Fox News or what's the other one? The other Nazi one, Newsmax, and then having to report on what's there. After a while, they're in shell shock. They need a lot of time off. So here's one. In this one called, it's a series about the energy crisis. In one, the narrator denies fossil fuels are to blame for climate change, stating, quote, "The planet has been warming and cooling since prehistoric times, long before carbon emissions were a factor." And in order to push that Nazi line of Maga-Nazi line of reasoning, the narrator claims as fact, quote, "Renewable energy sources don't contribute that much energy. Unlike coal or fossil fuels, energy from wind or sun is just unreliable, expensive, and difficult to store." And instead of affirming the dangers of climate change and energy poverty, the video pits one against the other, stating energy poverty, not climate change, is the real threat. That's just on the energy side, the climate change side. Here's what they said about British rule in India. This, quote, "This Western influence helped transform the country in many positive ways." The video praises British Empire for being, quote, "bringing advances in transportation, agriculture, and government, and the influence, here comes, of Christianity." Here's another bald-faced outright lie that they tell to young children, and I've met adults who believe this particular line of crap, many of them. In a one titled, "Marcel Makes a Sacrifice," Canada's universal health care system, which is infinitely superior to ours, is criticized as slow and substandard, both lies. Marcel is forced to sacrifice taking a college preparation class so his father can get life-saving surgery through the American medical system, the superior American health system. Well, that's just not true. It's not slow. There can be backups for things. It's hardly substandard. I think they're saying that the Canadian doctors are all witch doctors or something and pray to weird idols because they're incompetent doctors. And also, when Marcel's father came down from Canada to America for his life-saving surgery, as it says, he probably was bankrupt. He was probably bankrupt at the end of that because none of his insurance would work here. You know, I'm just going to jump in here for a second. This is a fact. Maga-Nazis don't like facts, I know, but I know the people that watch this do. In 1917, at the end of World War I, there were, did it again, count them, two countries that did not have a system of universal health care in place for their workers. All the other countries in the world had figured out that, you know, if you want a stable, reliable workforce for a stable, reliable economy and a stable, reliable society, that this is something that the government should provide. It's not free, you know, you pay for it with taxes and things. But it's universal. It's no questions asked. And the healthcare is excellent. I have that from my own experience living in Hungary for 10 years, where I had 2 surgeries. My wife had one. We raised 2 children. Our medical bills totaled up over 10 years to $200. And we received world-class care. So let's see what else the propagandist Maga-Nazis are saying. It says, the narrator states that, quote, like many countries, Canada has universal government-run healthcare system, which means that Canadians have fewer options for treatment and wait longer for medical care than people in advanced countries. Perfect. Okay, so back to what I jumped off track there with a minute ago. In 1917, there were only 2 countries that hadn't figured that out. Well, that year, Japan, a highly industrialized nation, figured out that, you know, if they wanted to get their act back together after the war and become a manufacturing based economy and take part in the world economy, that they would have to provide universal health care for anybody who needed it so they could work and live. So that just leaves us, folks. We're number one. We're number one. The only one without universal health care in the industrialized world, and we're proud of it. We're proud of it. I've met people, especially here in North Carolina, which is full of very unsophisticated people, especially out west, got into a big argument with me at my place up there that I used to have a restaurant and a bar up there. I was tending bar, and she just started screaming at me about how, our medical system is far superior than everybody else's. Well, everybody at the bar, I was surprised, every single person there turned and laughed at her, loud. And I asked her, I said, have you ever been to another country to see how these things work? She confessed then and there she had never actually left the county, except once when she went to the Alabama coast. So, no, she was just shooting off her mouth because her head was full of this bullshit. Don't get me wrong, America has a very good healthcare system, and it is one of the best, there's no question. And I know I've broken a lot of bones, and I've got cancer. I've talked to a lot of people that have had their lives saved by caring doctors, but that's only if you can afford it, man. That's it. If you're poor, you die. Simple as that. Or you get inferior treatment, or you get shunted off to another hospital or clinic where they'll just shunt you off to the next one. I'm fortunate. I had a good career as a pilot. My wife had a wonderful career in radio. We still have benefits, or we can afford the supplement now. We're both on Medicare. So we get to see the good side of it all the time. But I also know the bad side. I wasn't always a pilot, so I've seen the bad side too. Just a couple of more and then we'll call it a day. In one of these racist Maga-Nazi diatribes, describes George Floyd as, quote, a black man who resisted arrest. Criticizes people who demand police reform by claiming the character in their video, Mateo, saw protesters smash their windows, steal all their merchandise, and even, I got to get this thing out of the way, and set the buildings on fire. And so he muses, how would fewer cops be able to stop this type of behavior? It promotes a very, very radical right-wing idea of national crime crisis, which there is a crime crisis. It's increasing. Nobody's denying that, although murders are way down. Claiming Mateo has seen an increase in shoplifting at his family store. It just goes on and on. I'm sorry, I'd rather not read anymore. So it's about time to call it a day, folks. I ask you to consider what I said here, give it some thought, look around your own state, and I ask you for something else. Support Ukraine any way you can. Write letters, talk to people, send emails, send $5, $10 to Chef Andras's World Central Kitchen, where they feed the children who have been bombed out of their houses. They feed the children lying in hospitals with a leg blown off or an arm blown off. They feed the mothers who are pregnant and have no place to live. So consider doing that, would you please? You can find out more about them at their own website. You can learn more about them on my website, which is www.gvbrights.com, where I also talk shamelessly, promote my books, but I also talk about the mentoring I do in Africa and a little bit about Ukraine. You can make a difference. None of us out there can afford enough to donate enough to buy a tank. That's a lot. But $50 or $100 will feed a lot of children and mothers and seniors who've had their world blasted out from under them by the ultimate Nazi who claimed he invaded Ukraine, which, as he says, in his mind is a country that doesn't even exist. His reason was to expel the Nazis. We all know what a lie that is and what a lying piece of crap Vladimir Putin is. So please, look up the World Food Kitchen. Do what you can. Please. And I'll close with this. Slava Ukraina.